Here we go, one down the back. Corey?
Back in 1997, Jimmy Sutton did some research on the worm healings and that. And today, where do we see? We're doing more research and that. Where do we? Do we just give the research away to overseas, or do we add some value here? And where's DINZ's view? Rhys, what's your view on that?
I'll have a go, Corey. I mean, Stephen gave you a bit of an answer, and that the work that's been done over the years has largely added to the work that Rhys has been doing over the last 5 or 10 with healthy food companies. I think it's an asset to us. In terms of the major investment that Stephen alluded to, RepairX, I was hoping I wasn't going to be asked, but the reality of the RepairX situation is that it's been desperately disappointing how long it's taken, but we're in a position now where we think those clinical trials on humans will begin next month, and we'll be in a position to report the results of that trial to you at the next conference, or hopefully before. So I'm not proud of how long that's taken me to get going, but that's the state of affairs. I'm really optimistic about that clinical trial work adding to the kind of evidence that Stephen's just told you about efficacy of Velvet for a whole range of human health purposes, and that again is going to be more ammunition for Rhys's strategy around working closely with healthy food or pharmaceutical companies.
We've sort of got to keep our supply in check with demand. Have you guys sort of done any modelling or got any idea of how quickly Velvet is going to come on stream over the next year or two, and what some sort of figures behind what you think you can handle as far as growth in the velvet industry and the market's sucking that up?
I'll just quickly lead into that while they're figuring themselves out, Grant. But in terms of DINZ modelling, we do try and model the herd dynamics, but I probably wouldn't want to stake my life on any of that, because it really depends. I mean, the data we have to work with is agricultural statistics, which you guys report voluntarily to MPI, and maybe don't tell them exactly the facts perfectly. The other statistic we have is slaughter statistics. So right now, I think we've mentioned we've got over 55% females coming through in the slaughter for the year to date, which is pretty horrific if you think about it in terms of hind liquidation. But there's also going to be some element in there of stag retention, and it's just about impossible for us to actually disentangle what's stag retention and what's hind liquidation, but there's going to be some of both. So that's not really an answer, but we are expecting velvet production growth for sure.
I think what you've got to think about is there was a comment passed earlier on today in the venison discussion, and that went along the lines of, if you were to increase 10% on an annual basis, you might get away with being able to handle the volume that comes on stream. The critical thing is, are you going to increase more than 10%? And I think that's where we've got to be extremely cautious. You know, it's not good for us to sit up here and talk about tonnages of product that we produce, because that gets used against us in the marketplace. So we have to be very careful what we say. It's live stream. But I can give you an example of 2-year-old velvet that came through my grading shed this year. 12 months ago, I'd handled 12 tonne of B, C and D grades. This year, I've handled 23 tonnes. Tells me that a lot of guys carried spikers through to 2-year-old. My gut feeling is that if it's B, C, D, a lot of that product got its head chopped off. So it won't be in the marketplace next year. But I'm sure that equally the same number of spikers will have been carried through again this year. So we're aware that a lot of you guys are thinking the money's great, we're going to try and capture more of it. And I think all the companies are trying to keep pace with, excuse me, with those increases in quantities, but really just be careful. If you do overproduce too quickly, you could end up like the dairy industry. I said it last year, and I'm saying it again this year.
Anything else, Johnny?
Grant, in relation to your question, can the markets withstand more product? With the indicators that we've had already for next year, the answer to that is positive. Remembering, though, Rhys's wise words about exceeding growth demand, consumption demand. And we've heard from our friends from KGC and what their plans are, and you can take from that yes, they will want more velvet.
I could just add two parts to that as an answer, and one would be if the top end growth is in the healthy functional food market, well, hopefully that does grow demand so we can grow our supply. And secondly, if we continue to cut our velvet on time, round, short, we're not going to increase our weight in a sudden hurry. So that's the thing, maintaining quality and building on the brand we've got in place now.
Got another one, Ponty?
Yep. Ponty, can I I'll just add my 2 cents worth, because it's just a chance for me to stand on the podium again and just the reality is, Grant, one of the key things I need to get across is we're still quite exposed to things beyond pure economics, to games that might be played, let's face it, up around some of those Chinese traders. And we've got to get away from that. We've got to be working more with healthy food companies. All of these guys up here deal or in discussions with healthy food companies. But one thing, even though it feels like they might be paying you a little bit more money today coming down the gateway, we've got to stay away from those opportunistic type traders coming down the gateway and deal with people that have got longer term plans in place for stability and dealing with companies as well.
Yeah, thank you. We've heard from Rhys that with the current weakening of the jelly tip price, that there are some price pressures within the market. Do you think that as an industry that we should take our foot off the accelerator a little next year in demanding ever increasing prices from the marketplace and have a more stable situation?
My gut feel is this year was pretty good returns. It was a lot more than I would have predicted. If you end up growing too much, it may be good for those traders in the short term, but it's certainly not going to be good for our long-term investments around healthy food companies, them spending the money when they're seeing their main ingredient, the cost of their main ingredient going through the roof rather than nice little sustained increases. So that would be my view. I'd be a bit nervous about that.
Yeah, I'll back Rhys on that. The other thing is that the season we've just had, we saw the dynamics where the price increased over the season. So we didn't try and pitch it too high at the start, although there was a solid increase from the previous season. Something Rhys mentioned earlier was that the consumption of deer velvet in China around the Chinese New Year actually increased. Yeah. So, that sort of went contrary to the message that the tip price had dropped. But yeah, I think it's just keeping an ear to the market and listening to our buyers, but also trying to judge it ourselves as to where it's at. Certainly, if the market can withstand more increases, why not? But when you jump $20 from one season to the next, you've still just got to start to wonder how much more can you expect to extract.
Yeah, I'd just throw in there, Ponty, you heard Grant Howie say that if you push the price of venison up too high, the restaurants take it off the menu. Sorry, John.
It's a no-brainer, Ponty. I mean, there are gains to be made in terms of production, but the cry has got to be for stability when we're at this level. I mean, it's bloody good money, and let's not get greedy.
Colin, you're going to no?
Yes, I'd just like to know what is the situation with our competitors. We used to call them competitors. I'm meaning Canada, China, Russia and Australia. Are they still our competitors, or have they gone away from velvet production?
Around 10 years ago, Australia produced over 60 tonnes of velvet. My understanding is they're under 14 tonnes annually now. Same time we had over 220 tonnes out of Canada with around about 50 tonnes out of USA. The last year I don't think there was 80 tonnes out of Canada and the US together. If you look at the reindeer production, and you can go on the web and check this out, but with the reindeer, my understanding is that the herd has shrunk, or the land that the herd lives on in Russia has shrunk to under half of its original size, and the volume of reindeer velvet has come down significantly. I understand that the one young, or morale, is pretty stable in its production in Russia. I can't really see a lot of growth at this stage because the costs of production there are pretty expensive. If you look in China, the increase seems to be around the sika deer, not so much around the elk deer. Once again, it's really expensive out in the western part of China, where most of the elk's produced, to actually produce your product. Hope that helps.
Sorry, Steve. And when we look, just to sort of add to that, from a marketing perspective, when we look at the story that we can tell, or our unique selling proposition, it blows all our competitors out the water. And I'm not just talking about so Russian Altai, obviously they farm in a sort of a free range environment, but it's our professional farming systems that are starting to resonate well with food companies and with younger oriented medical doctors. But it's beyond that. It's how we treat our velvet as a food. Hence the introduction of the Velvet Status Declaration form. So it's really about making sure that if you have a magnificent Korean company that's going to use our animal product as one of their major ingredients, they can feel safe that our product has been produced in a really safe environment. So our competitors don't have that type of safety profile. We've got a great story we can tell out there.
Yes, it's just a bit of a comment. Rhys, I feel those tonnage figures of yours may actually give the wrong indication on what actually happened this year. There was a huge demand by the market to outgrow velvet this year. Now, to outgrow velvet on our stag past our normal grades, we can put 10, 15% of weight into our product just like that without any genetic increase or anything. So if people want to trade it and demand it and pay more for it, or the same as quality grade velvet, we will certainly be able to increase our production very rapidly. So where does that demand come from and how is it marketed?
Is that a question, Steve?
Yeah, who drives it? Yeah, we don't drive it. We get asked to grow it. And
that should be individual companies asking that, Steve. It won't be a holistic.
Yes, but that can increase our velvet production 10 or 15% in 1 year.
But it hasn't,
without
though.
any increase in genetics.
It hasn't, though.
I think it has this year. There's I can name it, probably a huge amount of tonnes of it that was actually grown this year. It wasn't grown the previous season.
We'll wait until the end of the season, I guess. We'll wait until the end of the season when we can get our figures in. But to date, we have the figures that we've got to date just don't support the fact of a huge. Definitely, production has grown, in terms of weight, volume, but it's not hugely significant at the moment, based upon last year.
We got one more down there. Yep.
Yeah, guys, just interested to know. I see the velvet that was up there was pretty short-looking stuff. What kind of velvet would you like us to grow for you this season? What are we going to get paid more for? What do you really want from us this season? Because there's still the old adage of weight pays. Everyone gets excited about big weights, but will we get rewarded for very short velvet?
Tony, you've been quiet.
I suppose it's an age-old question, but we've in the last few years we've experienced China having the demand for the round top tips, and now that demand is also in Korea. So we've seen that the regrowth price 10 years ago, probably averaged around 85. The previous season, I won't state it publicly, but it was certainly up around sort of the 140 mark, 150. So that in itself tells us that we're getting paid for quality. The other side to the coin is that if we continue to use genetics that are going to go away from the traditional style stick and the round top particularly, there'll come a day that that I believe may be discounted if we are to produce more velvet in New Zealand. So if you keep your velvet tidy, clean and asymmetrical, I guess, well, there's no reason why we won't continue with the quality we've got.
My concern at this stage is that we're not getting enough of the correctly cut stuff. The buyers come in and say, hey, this is really nice. We love your velvet, you're cutting it nice and short, but we don't actually get that much reward for it over the heavier, more ugly, lumpy type stuff. So are we going to see any differential in price on that really rewards us?
I think, Jerry, the answer to that question will be spelled out closer to the start of the season. Yeah, there's probably room for more Chinese type velvet, but that comes off a certain age type of animal. So, I mean, I agree with my colleague's answer to you that, you know, keep it clean, keep it tidy, but, I mean, individual buyers will have individual requests, and I think you've just got to go with that at the time that you get that signal.
You want to go? No? All right. Any last question, or are we done? Okay, one down the back, Richard, and then we're done.
Yeah, thanks. Rhys, I remember last year, or perhaps even the year before, you guys were concerned that the construction of factories in China was potentially going to create demand that wasn't necessarily matched with consumption. Is there any indication that there's a stockpile getting created of product up there? Or?
That's a really good question. What a great one to finish on. So,
stand up, Rhys.
Yeah, my view, and appreciate some comments from colleagues up here, but I still see that as a very serious threat. You've seen the figures that I put up there in terms of our exports. You've seen that China is still a massive influencer in sort of what happened. So my sort of read of the season, and I'm sad to be corrected, was I think the Korean buyers came on early in the season, but then the Chinese buyers came on very, very strongly. Now, a lot of those guys they're traders with government money. They need to put through their factory, and that's not driving consumption demand, which is where we've got to be focused. We cannot be focused on sort of little blips in terms of wholesale demand. So yes, I personally see that as a very real issue that we need to be very mindful of. And again, I hate to harp on about this, but that's why we need to be supportive of the healthy food strategies. And these guys, they've all got their own ones. Does anyone else want to comment? No.
So was the question really how much is stored? You missed it. Well, I know that as recent as 2 weeks ago, one of the major traders, I saw a video of inside of his cool stores, and every company that represents or sells velvet into China out of New Zealand had stock in that guy's place. And it didn't matter whether the companies didn't think they were selling there or not. This guy's like an octopus, and it was all there. So I think that the tally was something like 170 tonnes the guy had inside his store. But you've got to put it into context. That guy could have had 170 tonne last year too. Yeah.
So this guy every year, when if we go up there in October, just before our season, he'll open up all his store, he'll show, and there'll be 200 tonnes sitting there. Last year he did this, and he said, I'm going to drop the value of New Zealand velvet. And I said, well, good on you, I already know it's getting sold up in Korea. So, and 200 tonne, we're talking a 1,400 tonne consumption. So yes, it looks big. I know you're trying to scare me, but you've also got a lot of product that's come out of the north, just finished out of the northern hemisphere. and we need to always go into the season. We know our own velvet production in New Zealand doesn't 100% fit the current season, that there's always residual product there at the start of the season. So if there's 200 tonnes sitting in the major guy up in Dong Bay at the moment, I don't see that in itself as being a big issue. What I was talking about was the proliferation of new factories.
All right, we'll knock it off there, guys.